Hello and welcome to Tech Trends with me, Olayemi Odunuga. On this week's show, first we feature the 6th edition of the Nigerian Fintech Week. Then my conversation with Ray Sharma, lead partner at Pacer Ventures, and we talk about venture funding for African tech startups. We'll give you all that in a moment, but as always, this is the program that takes you on a ride in 25 minutes to seek out innovation and creativity that are unique to Africa. Our mission is to accelerate the development of a better financial system. It's not just development of a better Bitcoin financial system. And so we want to back the best teams who have the biggest ideas, unique solutions to big problems. Fintech, resilience, innovation, and diversification. That's the focus of the 6th edition of the Nigerian Fintech Week, which aimed to showcase the breadth of the country's financial industry, as well as the urgency to adapt and thrive in the ever-evolving landscape. Here's more in this next report. The 2023 edition of the Nigerian Fintech Week marks a significant milestone on the country's financial technology landscape. Anchored on the theme Fintech, Resilience, Innovation and Diversification, the event brings together a diverse assembly of industry experts, innovators, regulators and entrepreneurs, all united in their commitment to shape the future of financial technology in Nigeria.
The Nigeria Fintech Week is an opportunity to showcase new thinking, solutions, thought leaderships and products by our fintech ecosystem as we seek to connect, accelerate the development of and advocate for fintech firms. The theme and overarching focus for this year's meeting is Fintechs, Resilience, Innovation and Diversification. A rather apt title at this time of massive global social, economic and political changes as the fintech industry operates in a dynamic and challenging environment where resilience, innovation, diversification are key to success and essential for fintech firms to thrive in a competitive, highly regulated and rapidly evolving industry. Our fintechs provide a foundation, and indeed these three pillars, resilience, innovation and diversification, provide a foundation for long-term success and enable fintech companies to adapt to changing circumstances, mitigate risks, competitive threats, emerging technologies, and continue to meet the needs of their customers.
As thought leaders and speakers provide valuable insights and perspectives, participants are immersed in a rich tapestry of discussions and presentations.
Why do we care about fintech? And it's basically two things. First of all, you're bringing people into the banking system. You're doing things to transform the entire continent. And that speaks directly to what we're trying to do on the continent in trying to build a digital transformation together with our partners in Africa. We often used to say, we need African solutions to African problems. Heard that? Yeah? I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong because we need African solutions to global problems. We need to bring the solutions that you're developing to emerging markets and markets around the world. The problems that we face are too big to be focused on one continent. They're too big that we have to think about them just myopically. Oh, Africa, you have these problems, you go fix them. We need to be working together to address things like climate change, banking the unbanked, digital access together. And so when we talk about the digital transformation with Africa, we're talking about major US investments in infrastructure.
As the 2023 theme speaks to the essence of the country's fintech industry, panelists shared their perspectives on strategies for building compliant organizations as well as understanding regulatory frameworks.
Everybody thinks when you think fintech, it's only financial, but it goes beyond financial, right? So when in terms of compliance for a lot of all these fintech companies, different compliance and regulatory parameters exist. You know, there's, for example, there's the CBN that regulates a certain aspect of the fintech space. There is SEC that also regulates a certain aspect of the fintech space. Even insurance tech, there is NICOM that needs to regulate a certain space within that sector. So when it comes to compliance and regulatory framework, we generally are looking for a framework that speaks to the entire fintech industry, which we don't really have today. We just have subsets of different regulatory institutions managing different subsets of the fintech space, right? So when it comes to compliance and as a fintech company, whatever subset space you work in or you are in, you need to also consider the regulatory compliance for that space.
There is governance, there is regulation, which is there in the books, but how many knows this or how many of them practices this in the real time? That matters a lot. And that is the gap when we look it into a broader scale. Because if you look at CBN or NIDA, of course, these are Nigerian-based approaches, correct? Of course, there are global companies. If you look at all the fintechs, majority of the fintechs that we say, there's a link to a global economy. Maybe the funding is coming from US or the promoter is from the US or the UK or other grown economies. So there are tight regulations in those parts of the world. Let's implement it and practice it locally so that the industry become more transparent.
The first consideration that fintech companies have to have is to understand the regulations and the regulators, because if you do not understand your regulators and regulations, then you can't even be compliant because you wouldn't know how to be compliant. Now, they're setting, as Bolaho had said, the fintech space, unlike other spaces where you have everything in a certain law or just one regulator, fintech is still growing, right? It's been around for a while, but it's still growing. So we have a lot of regulators from the CAC, which is the first regulator if you want to incorporate an entity, because if you want to own a company, you want to run a company in Nigeria, you can't run a company without incorporating the entity.
The event also saw the launch of a fintech white paper on Nigerian fintech's cloud adoption. The paper covers pillars of cloud computing, bringing to the fore issues on security and compliance, data migration, and adoption roadmaps. As the curtains of this year's edition fall, the resonance of resilience, innovation, and diversification echo through the hall, leaving attendees invigorated and poised to continue to drive progress in the country's fintech sector. Art meets artificial intelligence at a gallery in London with the opening of a new show by artist and AI researcher Sugwen Chung, whose collaborations with robotic painters can sell for tens of thousands of pounds. Chung is rare in the art world, having previously been a researcher at MIT's Media Lab and has presented a TED Talk entitled Why I Draw with Robots.
My name is Sugwen Chung, and I'm an artist and researcher working in the intersection of art and technology. What that intersection means for me is, to an extent, reconciling different modes of expression. I think what I love about working with new technologies is the potential of building the tools that suit and that help shape my own creative expression and way of navigating the work and world through creativity.
Chung is regarded as a pioneer of human and machine collaboration, even being named among the inaugural Time 100 AI list as one of the 100 most influential people in AI 2023 under the Innovator category.
I think there's something about artistic practice and technological development that's about sort of chasing one's curiosity, but also finding ways to shape an exploration that isn't bounded by reason or logic, but something maybe a bit more intuitive and expressive.
The Chinese Canadian was born in Hong Kong and brought up in Toronto by an opera singing father and a computer programming mother.
What I love about the project is it's not really one of control or repetition or sequencing. There is an overhead camera in the work that reads my gestures in space when I'm making the work. There's a neural network that drives, in one of the generations, there's a neural network that's trained on 2 decades of my own drawing data that responds to the mark I make on the canvas. It really creates an embodied linkage between myself and the robotic system that isn't pre-sequenced, that isn't sort of pre-controlled, and I think in that way we're able, the system, the robotic units, myself, are able to respond in order to make an image. So it's I like to think of it as a kind of embodied AI system that reads myself in the space as one of the prime collaborators.
Chung now works with various kinds of robots, including those designed and built to mimic movements recognized by computer vision technology. Named DOUG, Drawing Operations Unit Generation, these machines mimic the artist's hand-drawn gestures and synchronously draw along.
I've been working in the space of art technology, AI, robotics, for about 15 years now. I'm really interested in the evolution of the human hand and ways to extend my own drawing sensibility through various technologies, AI systems, robotics, virtual reality. I've been developing a multi-generational project called Drawing Operations, in which I've been thinking about the robotic unit as a type of collaborator. Through that pursuit of hybridity and form, I've worked with AI systems, I've worked with neural networks, I've worked with computer vision and public cameras to think about ways drawing can expand and how the mark made by hand can shape and be shaped by the mark made by machine.
Chung's new exhibition, Relational Gestures, is at the House of Fine Art in Mayfair. Gaza residents say they feel isolated from the whole world after Israel shut down communications in the Gaza Strip.
Having a telecommunications blackout basically destroys every chance for first responders, for paramedics, for police to respond to and assess those who are in need, because they cannot call. And that's one thing. For us as journalists, we cannot contact our news agencies or our satellite channels. And the most important part for me is I cannot get in touch with my family, and my family cannot get in touch with me. I don't know how they're doing or what problems do they have.
Elon Musk has said that SpaceX Starlink will support communication links in Gaza with internationally recognized aid organizations, prompting Israel's communication minister to say Israel would fight the move. Musk said in a post on social media platform X that it was not clear who has authority for ground links in Gaza, adding that no terminal has requested a connection in that area.
We definitely appreciate that the generous move by Mr. Elon Musk to supply internet connection to Palestinian and local NGOs in the Gaza Strip to help aid the population and help Palestinians in Gaza connect with each other and connect with the outside world.
SpaceX did not immediately respond to comment on how it would ensure any Starlink connection was used by aid organizations and not by the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip. However, responding to Musk's post on X, Israel's communication minister said Israel will use all means at its disposal to fight this. In recent years, the African startup ecosystem has experienced a notable surge in venture funding, signaling a promising era for innovation on the continent. With a growing pool of young, dynamic entrepreneurs and a growing tech scene, Africa has now become an attractive destination for global investors seeking untapped opportunities. However, challenges persist, including a relative lack of early-stage funding and regulatory hurdles. But despite these obstacles, the momentum is undeniable, and Africa's vibrant startup ecosystem is poised to make significant strides in the global tech arena. Ray Sharma, lead partner at VC fund firm Pacer Ventures, talks more about this. Thank you so much, Ray Sharma, lead partner at Pacer Ventures, for joining us on Tech Trends today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tell me, Ray, you've been involved in venture funding for startups, including those in Africa. What do you see as the unique opportunities for African startups in the tech space?
Yeah, it's true. I've funded a couple of hundred startups so far in my career, but I'll give you an answer that's the typical answer and then something that I find that's really unique. The typical answer is relates to demographics, the youthful population, the births that are happening on the continent and in the country, the migration from the rural area to the cities, and the resulting productivity impact. These things are all very positive. But some of the less obvious things are, for example, one of the implications of COVID was an explosion of education technology companies. And I have a thesis that there's very few places in the world that'll benefit more from the changes in EdTech than the continent and Nigeria itself. In addition, something profound happened earlier this year with the release of ChatGPT. ChatGPT also resulted in a whole new generation of software development. This has leveled the playing field globally. And with this youthful population that we think is exceptionally talented, there's an opportunity for Nigeria to leapfrog and join the world stage when it comes to software development. It's one of those situations where having 20 years development experience doesn't really help you now. You're going to have a whole new paradigm of software development, and we're hopeful that we can lead the way starting in Lagos.
Now, Ray, if I am correct, this is like your fourth or fifth time in Nigeria, right?
Yeah, I've been here many times.
Yeah, so as an international investor, what key factors do you look out for in startups here and in Africa? What key factors do you look out when you're looking to invest?
Before we settled on this region, I explored the world. I went to South America, Colombia in particular, Europe, US, because we had a model in Toronto that had worked really well. But what I found that was particularly interesting here is this is where need intersected with opportunity. There's another important factor, which is Nigeria really sets the trend, not just for the continent, but for the diaspora. It's more than just the large population. It's the Afrobeats, it's the fashion, it's the food, and I spent some time studying cultural things like Nollywood. And importantly, what I did is I surrounded myself with partners, local partners, who are exceptional. So this is, although I'm here talking today, I think one message I want to leave with you and everyone, which is this is a Nigerian effort led by Nigerians for Nigerians. And the hope is, just like the continent tends to copy Nigeria in so many different ways, the hope is that if you can make it in Lagos, you can make it anywhere.
True, and Nigerians are always proud to be pace setters anywhere they go. But would you say that the ongoing AI revolution has had an impact on your investment decisions?
Absolutely. There's a new investment we're about to bring to the continent. It's a AI tutor. It's actually a gentleman out of London who's developed the technology. Imagine a student anywhere in the country who points the AI to a particular textbook. The textbook gets ingested by the AI, and through WhatsApp or your feature phone, you're able to ask questions to the AI tutor about that textbook. One of the things that we learned about Nigeria and the continent is the student-to-teacher ratio is relatively high when you compare it to the West. Now imagine a one-to-one experience where you can talk to a tutor anytime you want, and we think this should be really beneficial here.
Fantastic. We'll see how that goes. I'll be on the lookout for it. But tell me, Ray, what advice do you have for aspiring African tech entrepreneurs that are seeking venture funding? Like, what should they focus on?
It's an excellent question. It's the two primary things, and this is again oversimplifying, but the two primary things we look at is the entrepreneur's understanding of their serviceable, addressable market opportunity, what we call SAM, and their ability to analyze and understand their market pricing-wise, what we call in the West unit economics, which is to understand the profitability of your customer by every which way, whether it be by demographic or geography. And then the second thing we look at is the entrepreneurs themselves. Oftentimes, especially at this early stage of investing, I'd say 95% plus of the time, the business that they end up doing is dramatically different than the business they present to us. And so what's happening between the beginning and that end conclusion is a lot of pivoting, a lot of direction into areas that they weren't expecting. So the entrepreneur needs to have the right ego so that when the time comes where their customers, say, for example, pull them in a different direction, that they're able to make the adjustments as necessary. It's a dynamicism, yes, but it's also having the right personality to not be overly fixated on their vision, and having a vision that is dynamic and able to evolve.
And how do you think that African governments can come in this, to help support the startups?
I have a bit of a different view when it comes to governments, because we all tend to really, we love to blame the government for our problems. It's not just a Nigerian thing, it's a global thing. If you look back at Canada, there's a disproportionate amount of time spent about complaining about the government. It's everywhere. It's in the restaurants, it's in the boardrooms. For me, I look at the role of government as just helping us not get in trouble, but generally not getting in the way too much, because the nature of entrepreneurship is almost like a random mutation in business. And so the government's role, where they can be helpful, is just making sure we don't do improper things, make sure we don't get ourselves into trouble through things like regulations. But generally speaking, I would prefer not to be dependent on government. I would rather be dependent on the fundamentals, which is the entrepreneurs and the customers. So if we can service the customers well and the customers appreciate it, the government shouldn't matter too much. No disrespect to the government, but like I said, I see the role of government differently. Not necessarily, we need them to be successful. We just need them so that we don't do improper things.
Okay, so now looking at the numbers, when we talk about venture funding or funding in general for African tech startups, what should we expect in the future?
So the continent is almost about the same size as Canada when it comes to venture capital. That's not a compliment, because Canada has 40 million people and the continent is around 1.5 billion or so, depending on the estimate you look at. So you could look at it negatively and say the environment is, or the market is quite small. I mentioned the 4 countries that are head and shoulders above the rest. When you look at those, it's Nigeria, the 3, and then it really drops off. But I look at it very optimistically. I look at this glass half full, because what I see 10, 20, 30 years of growth dramatically outpacing the rest of the world. And just inevitably through, the fullness of time, Africa will rise and then take its rightful place in the world stage. See, to me, and I looked at this objectively. Like I said earlier, I looked at all the different areas around the world, including where I'm born in India. And it would have been much more natural for me to focus on India. But I think for me, and I can lay out the thesis, but I think I already have, it's not a question of is Africa or it's a continent the next frontier. Without, to me, there's no doubt it is the next and last frontier. So there's a lot of really exciting things to look forward to in terms of the country and the continent.
Mm-hmm. So just before we close this interview, Ray, as a venture capitalist with a global perspective, what excites you the most about the potential of the tech space in Africa?
So one thing about entrepreneurship and the tech space in general is that we love having stories, just like I think anywhere. We love to have stories to look up to. So when Zuckerberg came out with Facebook, you would have noticed just hundreds of social networking companies spawn in inspiration of that particular startup. And this is a tried and tested thing, throughout the world and throughout the sectors and throughout the cycles. So what I'm really looking forward to is the examples that can be used so that the future generations, this tremendously youthful population, has examples to look up forward to aspire to, and to emulate. And then that should create this thing we call cradle to grave, which is an endless cycle of entrepreneurs becoming successful, and then they help the next generation of entrepreneurs. When I go around giving speeches and talking to people, I do try to leave this, and I'll leave this as the final point too, which is I would hope that when people do achieve their own success, that they look for ways to pay it forward. And there's no better ways that a successful entrepreneur can pay it forward than to become an angel investor and start investing in other entrepreneurs around them. So that's something that I would hope is something that can provide almost a flywheel, which is a self-feeding cycle, which will ultimately lead to accelerated evolution.
Well, I also hope that that comes to fruition soon. Thank you so much, Ray Sharma, lead partner at Pacer Ventures, for joining us on Tech Trends.
Thanks again.
Here's where we draw the curtain of the program this week. Thank you for watching. As always, Tech Trends is here to share insights, trends, and developments happening in the tech space. If you missed any part of the program, you can always catch up on the channel's TV YouTube accounts where we have all of our episodes, and I encourage you to watch, share, and like your favorite editions. For Tech Trends, I'm Olayemi Odunuga. I'll see you next time.